So are we on? Delia? All set, okay. So welcome to the December 12, 2019 Nahant School Committee meeting. We will get started with a salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So on the agenda tonight, we have a presentation by the Johnson School Wellness Committee, and we're going to move that up to the beginning. So I would like to welcome Dr. Sherry Salamani and thank her for presenting to us.
So I wanted to talk about a few things that the Wellness Committee has been doing this year. One of the programs that we have called TLC program, the Student Council is actively supporting the Toys for Local Children program, which is in full swing now. We're looking for new, unwrapped, non-violent toys to be donated to the local programs, which will help Nahant and Swampscott families in need. Students or families can bring in a donation, and they will be, their name will be placed in a raffle, which will be drawn on Monday, December 16th. Another thing that the Wellness Committee is doing this year, on Friday, December 20th, the American Red Cross Bloodmobile will be at the Johnson School from 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And we've sent out flyers, and we actually just posted a flyer in the town hall as well. Anyone who is an adult or over the age of 16 basically can donate blood from Nahant or another town. And we will be sending an email with sign-up links as well, but even if you can just stop by on that day, you can reach out to the school nurse, Mrs. Delicio. Walk-ins are welcomed on that day of the event as well. And lastly, I wanted to talk about all the stuff we've been doing with the SRTS, Safe Routes to School program. For the past couple of years, we've been very actively involved. We have held our walk or, it's called walk or bike, but we like to call it walk or wheel, because some of our kids actually ride their scooters. Again, it's in conjunction with all the Safe Routes to School programs. This year, we applied for a $6,000 grant, which will hopefully help us upgrade the signs and paintings of the crosswalks around the school to increase visibility and encourage active transportation by children and families.
Great.
Thank you. Some other items that the Wellness Committee is addressing is health education, and it's moving forward. We're implementing 2 newly purchased programs. The Great Body Shop is the program that Ms. Brett is instituting during health blocks in the physical education schedule. The second newly purchased curriculum is called Understanding Our Differences, and it will be started in January in grades 3 and 4. This curriculum is designed to educate communities and schools to value and accept people of all abilities and disabilities through interactive disability awareness programs. It covers 10 disabilities and chronic medical conditions so that students gain a true sense of respect, appreciation, and acceptance of others and become better prepared for our increasingly diverse worlds of school and our communities. The curriculum was purchased in fiscal year 2019 and will be implemented with the help of Michelle Dom, Mrs. Delicio, and parent and community volunteers. And we're looking forward to more volunteers who are interested in helping the committee to assist with upcoming units that are geared towards medical conditions. And I know there is a diabetes and seizure unit that's coming up in the near future. The Wellness Committee has a goal in keeping with the motto of Be Your Best Self, where we encourage and support healthy snacks in our school. Mrs. Liana Deloyd, our nutritionist consultant, has created a handout for parents and staff to encourage nutritious and healthy snacks. The Johnson School staff participated in a professional development day on this topic and were provided with examples of healthy, nut-free snacks that we encourage our students to bring to school. And more activities are planned for the future. For example, a red day, where students are given some notice and families are given notice, where kids can choose a healthy red-colored food and bring it to school, and we can have a contest. Lots of things to make this fun and interactive, because our students really need to understand more that what they put into their body as fuel has a tremendous impact on how their bodies function. And our students attended an assembly with Mrs. Deloy where she provided an engaging presentation on healthy food choices, nutrition content, and new snack suggestions. We also have a Boost Your Moo IQ activity going on. So there's an example of something that's fun. Students get to talk about the various ways that milk helps them and why it's such a good food. And the Wellness Committee now has a new social media page on Instagram. So follow the Johnson School Wellness, all one page. And Madam Chair, with your permission, I do want to mention the fact that Ms. Delicio is unable to be here. She's a chairperson. Dr. Soleimani, of course, is a member of the committee, as is two members of the school committee, Mrs. Sherlock and Mrs. Sheehan, Mrs. Lane, Mrs. Deloyd, Ms. Shenna, and one of our staff members, Camilla Brett. And I have the pleasure of being named director. Not quite sure what that means, but I want to make sure everyone recognizes how Cheryl Delicio devotes so much extra time to health and awareness and the culture and climate of our building. So I want to put a shout out there for her. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Dr. Saman.
Thank you both.
Just for note keeping, I'm sorry. The last day to donate toys is which day? December? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the reading and approval of minutes. I think we should start with November 12th, the last meeting's minutes. And they're in everyone's packet.
I'll have to abstain because I was unable to
Right.
make that meeting.
Yeah, I chose that one to start with because Mike Flynn, Mr. Flynn, and Mr. Tria were not present at that meeting, so the remainder of us were. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, or?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting of November 12th, 2019.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Okay. So moving backwards, the October 22nd, 2019 meeting, all were here except for myself. So I believe the three of you would make a quorum.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from October 22nd.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Fabulous. And we will come back to, yes, we will come back to the September 10th, 2019 meeting minutes, if we can, later in the meeting. Okay, so moving on to correspondence and community input. Does anyone have anything they would like to share?
Do not.
Nope?
No.
No? Okay. Examination and authorization of the bills is ongoing. And we will move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Parentozzi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a report on the Department of Elementary Secondary Education Tiered Focus Monitoring Report and the DESC Stability Program Review. The Stability Program Review is actually what's called a tabletop review. No one actually visits our district. All of our documents are reviewed, and we're reviewed for a variety of items regarding making our educational programs available to students. It's called a sustainability review. That's brand new. This is the first year for a sustainability review. It looks at how we publicize our information, how we keep records, how we upload information for public use, what services we give children and young adults if you have a K-12 system. It describes the collaboration that we do with other agencies, how we stress family engagement, how we deal with disputes, and a variety of other things. It's really a deep dive into data about the district. I'm very pleased to report that we were written up for 2 partially implemented items of all of the items. One is an item that you will address later. If you remember, in the spring, I asked you to pass a new policy for homeless and military families. Well, this fall, the DESC and MASC got together and decided that the policy guidance they gave in the spring was not satisfactory, so we have new guidance. So what I did is I contacted both entities, the School Committee Association and the DESC, and I got the actual policies that they have already approved. So I'm going to ask you for a first reading of 3 policies tonight, a second reading and approval next meeting in January, and during that meeting we'll rescind the policy that we just passed. And it will meet all of the demands and requirements of the DESC. So that's one of the 2 things. And in the scope of things, that's technical and required, but we're already doing all the things that we need to do. The other one is sort of personal. The auditor was not pleased that I was the homeless education liaison nor the foster care liaison. The auditor believed that there could be a conflict of interest between my business responsibilities and the responsibilities of providing care for homeless students. So we've already changed my role as the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Liaison and the Foster Care Liaison, and that role is now being has been given to Debbie Canal, our Director of Special Education. And they were the only things that were found, which I think is pretty remarkable. So that was the desktop audit. In addition, we had the tiered focus monitoring report, and that really is 2 things. That is a review of documents and filings and other things that the district provides to DESC, and also a visit by a DESC staff member. And as you know, that took place early in November, and we got the report, and once again, I'm very, very pleased to tell you of all the hundreds of details that they've reviewed and viewed, there were once again two things that were partially implemented. We didn't have anything that wasn't implemented, which is really excellent. So the two things that were partially implemented, and before I tell you what they were, I want to tell you that it's really an issue of documentation, not action. So when I read them to you, you want to say, well, didn't you do that? And the answer is, yeah, we did, but we couldn't prove we did it, and we're working on that now. So one of them was criteria 10B, bullying intervention and prevention. And this is the exact language from the DESE report. Although the district provides annual training to faculty and staff on the bullying prevention and intervention plan, a review of documents and interviews indicate that bus drivers and cafeteria workers are not consistently included in this training. Technically, that's not accurate. Our cafeteria workers also have different roles, and they were trained, but they didn't sign the docket that they participated in the training. That has, Mr. Andrews has provided that signed documentation to them. And the same thing is true of our bus drivers. We don't have the documentation because we don't hire bus drivers, so we didn't have a file that was given to us by our bus companies that said they do the bus training, bus driver training on bullying. However, I have a 6-page document from them that details the training they do. So what we're doing is we're now getting from them the documentation that shows that that training has been done. And by the way, our contacts at the DESE all know, they already know all this. And then the second thing is on special education, item number 54. That gives you an idea how many there are. This is called professional development. And once again, we got a grade of partially implemented. So, and this is verbatim. Quote, a review of documents and administrative interviews indicated that the district has not provided in-service training to contracted transportation providers before they begin transporting special education students receiving special education transportation. This training would be on the student's need and appropriate methods of meeting those needs, unquote. We do, but we couldn't prove it when they went through the documents. So right now, our special education transporter, NRT, is working. I spoke with a representative again today. They are working with providing us the documentation so that we can forward it to DESE. However, they assured me that they do that training, just like they do the bullying training, anti-bullying training. And so the issue isn't that it's not being done, that our students are exposed to adults who aren't trained. It's that when the audit was done, particularly that last one, which is new, no one, actually, when I spoke to the director of safety and training for NRT, she said, we transport 3,000 special education students a day, and this is the first time I've ever heard of that documentation being needed. So, not complaining about it. It's a good thing. If you remember what I said about audits before, it really keeps us on our toes, catches us up when we need to. But we couldn't have even known that we should have provided that before we got to partially implemented. Once again, like the desktop audit, we had no category or subcategory evaluated as not implemented. Only those two as partially. So I want to thank Mr. Andrews, Mrs. Canal, and the entire staff for doing such a fabulous job. And obviously, we will be filing those 4 updates. The desktop auditor already knows that it will take us to the middle of January to have those policies on board, because I gave her a copy of the policy and told her what the schedule was. So we're in very, very good shape.
Can I ask questions? So with the, working with NRT, will they on an annual basis provide us some documentation saying that that training has happened?
That's the goal. I want to be able to have the documentation when we need it, but they do monthly training sessions, and I don't want this flood of paperwork when it's not necessary. So, you know, we're still working, as I said, they hadn't even known about this before. They have something called an unabridged permanent book of trainings, which they're going to send me. She said, Caroline said, get ready for this book, because evidently it's a giant book of all the trainings they do with their bus drivers, with all of the agenda and the sign-in sheets. So it's going to be massive. So the short answer is yes, we will have it.
I was just wondering if they could do some sort of attestation that this is what we train each bus driver on and sign it.
Well, we've already done that, for example, with the anti-bullying training. They sent us their anti-bullying program, and we've submitted it, and it was rejected because it didn't have the people's names.
Got it, so you have to.
So the detail is quite extensive. The good news is, when you get partially implemented criticisms of this detail and technical nature, it's really a good sign that the big things are being covered well.
Right, I agree.
That's how I choose to look at it. Madam Chair, item 5C is a two-page document that I got from Allegra Energy, and it simply tells you that the gas contracts with the town of Nahant, and we are the first one listed, have been assigned to a different company. It's something I think you should be aware of if anyone asks you, but frankly, the Constellation New Energy, Inc. is the new company that has the contract, and there's no impactful change. I want to read you the bolded section of the large paragraph. The rates, terms, and conditions of the current service agreement with Allegra will not change and will remain in effect throughout the term of the agreement. So there's no impact, but you should know who we have contracts with as the fiscal overseers of the district. So our new contract is with Constellation New Energy, Inc. And that's not just us, that's all of the gas for the entire town.
So do we have a contract, or is a contract with the town? Are there?
The contract is with the town, and it covers us.
Okay.
And the last item in my report, actually I have two more. I have one to add after yesterday. The Nahant Teachers Association Sick Leave Bank. When I came here, there had been a sick leave bank on the books for many, many years. The sick leave bank hadn't been used for over a decade and has fallen into a state that I would say it had been ignored. Not through anyone's fault. The union thought the district was keeping track of the data. The district thought the union was keeping track of the data. And nobody had applied for the sick leave bank. I believe it's 14 years. So I saw the article in the contract, and it wasn't high on my obligation list to get to right away, but ultimately I did get to it. So I've been meeting with the NTA representatives, and what you have in your packet is a new form that we developed. It's item 5D. And we,
They're a little out of order. I found it after item 7A.
oh, okay. I apologize, it's out of order. There it is. So what we're doing is we're formalizing the sick leave bank. We are making sure that it meets all of the logical requirements of the contract language and going much, much deeper in terms of, who can be a member, the eligibility to request a sick leave bank, medical certification, how someone enrolls, how someone de-enrolls, and the limitations of the sick leave bank benefits. One of the things that you will find very, very important in terms of your fiscal responsibilities is item 6 on the form, that the decision of the sick leave bank committee is binding and is not subject to any grievance or appeal procedures. So no one can claim they were dealt with in an unfair way. The membership of the committee is 2 members of the NTA and myself, just so you're aware of that, which is pretty typical. One reason I'm bringing this to you, and by the way, I will bring you the other pages of the document when it's finalized, but right now it's in really rough shape with corrections and scribbles. One of the reasons I'm bringing this to you is other members who work for us don't have this benefit. This is only for the NTA Unit A. It would be up to you and your negotiation subcommittee to determine whether in the future you wanted, for example, the paraprofessionals to have a sick leave bank or your non-union employees. Completely your decision. There's no language anywhere other than in this particular contract. So that's something to think about for the future.
How is the sick leave bank funded, or
The sick leave,
how
the
is
sick
something deposited
leave
into
bank is funded by a member donating 1 or more of their own sick days, which once they donate it to the bank, they can't use them, to build up a cadre of days. We are going to start with 0 because no one has records. No days had been taken from any NTA members because, once again, the previous administrations, and I thought for my first couple of years, that the NTA had somebody in charge of it. They thought we were doing it. So no one has had a sick day taken from them in anyone's memory. So here's the option that the committee, the joint committee was faced with. Do we take a whole bunch of sick leave from somebody and build up a cadre, or do we do it slowly? 1 or 2 days a year until we have a cadre. What we decided to do with that slow, lack of impact way, because when we talked about it, we thought, somebody may have thought they had X number of sick days, and now we're going to take a large number from them if they want to be a member of the sick leave bank, which they don't have to be. But we weren't sure that was fair, because when you decided to take your leave, you thought you had X number. To reduce it by a large amount didn't seem fair. Nor did it seem fair to have all of a sudden a very large number of days available. The sick leave bank committee has the ability to go back and ask members to give larger numbers if somebody needs them. So, for example, if this time next year there are 20 days in the bank and somebody needed 30, then the sick leave bank has the ability to go back and ask all the members for another day.
But not require them.
If the sick leave bank decided to ask for another day, in order to stay a member of the bank, you would be required.
And you're-
That doesn't mean you have to stay a member of the bank. The other thing we worked out that had never been worked out was what happens to part-time teachers. So if you think about it, in the past, the veteran staff members said, well, if you wanted to be a member of the bank, you gave a day. Well, if you work 1 day a week, 1 day is 25% of your sick days. If you work 2 days a week, it's 17%. Actually, it's 33%. I apologize. If you worked a full-time schedule, it was 7%. It was 1/15. So we worked that math out. And people will join the bank with a prorated number of donated days, which made sense. Okay? And once again, I will communicate with you once I have a formal copy of the document, and we can put it on the agenda again if members want to talk about it through the chair.
So the bottom line is there's no budgetary implications because NTA members are donating their own sick leave and other members are using that sick leave.
Yes, but
But, yeah, I was thinking of the but as I was saying that, so go for it.
there is a budgetary implication for substitute teachers.
Right. The reality is, though, if somebody is needing sick leave, they need sick leave.
Right,
That's
they'd be on
correct.
leave regardless.
So
They'd
they're
just
going to be on
un-
leave regardless. It's
Paid
just that
versus
they're going to be
unpaid.
getting paid through the help of the bank.
That's right. And
So-
the way things, I believe, have been handled in the past, if somebody would, first of all, I don't know if anyone in the district in the last 20 years has ever been out of sick days, with the exception of someone who had a serious illness about 14 years ago, which ended up in their demise. So that's why we were okay with just starting from scratch. And you're absolutely right. And frankly, as the administrator of the budget, I would probably, if push came to shove and somebody ran out of sick days, I would probably come to you and recommend that we gave them more, because we want to be appropriately respectful of people's health. Okay? And then the last thing I want to talk about, which I apologize is not on the agenda because it happened yesterday, is the power outage. Okay. So very late in the early hours before school started, we were informed that there were pretty significant power outages, including the Johnson Elementary School. I have still not found out why. The police department told me there were no accidents. No one ever used the word transformer blew up. At this point, I'm sitting here telling you nobody has communicated from National Grid. If National Grid, if you're out there, does this sound familiar? National Grid, if you're out there, tell us. But a couple of things happened. Kevin and I talked, and we decided that it was too late to either delay school or cancel school. The weather was warm, and we have a generator, we thought. So we took all the kids in normally. Kevin had an assembly with them. The staff was phenomenal. The kids were phenomenal. But what was happening is the power was coming back on and off, and the generator was coming back on and off. So we called a representative of Craft Power, who services our generator, and we called a representative of Pool and Electric, who is the company that does our electrical service. So by the time I got here, 8:30-ish, both of those individuals were on site. Maybe 30, 40 minutes later, right around 9:30-ish, power came back on. but I noticed that we had weird things happening. Lights were flickering, hums were coming out of HVAC units. So I went down and I told the electricians. Instantaneously, one of them threw the master switch, and we went back on generator power. What they then investigated was that we have three-phase power. You know, if you think about 110 volts, that's what's in a plug. 220 is what's in your electric stove and your dryer. And then we have another phase, which would be 330, which is very powerful, of course. What happened is only 2 of the 3 phases were reinstated. What we subsequently found out was that we had to wait for all the electricians knew it, but what they told me and what we waited for was all 3 phases to be reinstated. But in that time that we didn't have full power, damage was done. Computers lost their memories. Most of that is retrievable. Like my computer forgot where all the printers were in the district, and we were able to get that back. More significantly, we have some control units in our automatic fuse boxes that were damaged. We have ballast of lights that were burned out and light bulbs that were burned out, you know, the fluorescent light bulbs. Interestingly enough, none of the LED bulbs went out. They're just interesting. Don't know what it means. And we also lost a large portion of our motion detectors, a large percentage. So we have motion detectors, bulbs, ballast, and at least 2 control units in major, very large fuse boxes that control the automatic systems that say that, at 5 o'clock p.m. the outside lights come on, that kind of stuff. So we made a list. This morning I filed a damage claim with Maya, and that was then passed along to the secondary insurer, who then contacted me. So we have a claim for the damage. They are going to be talking to the electrician and Craft Power, then to the electric company. And subsequently, there will either be an insurance payment to cover it with a deductible, or a combination of an insurance payment and the power company's insurer. The downside of that is the money goes to the town and we pay the bills. Just like, remember the last storm? But if we need the money, we'll get it from the town. We have a very close working relationship, and so that's not an issue. So once again, the motion sensors, control panels, bulbs, and we're still investigating if any of our computers are damaged to the point they have to be replaced. Right now, we're not sure. The electricians actually haven't even been back yet to really start to go through things. We just notice things and put it on the list. And we have a list that's basically 1 sheet of paper, single space. So we don't think any of the HVAC units, even though they were making weird noises, we don't think any of them are damaged, but each of them has to be inspected. So even if none of them are damaged, we're going to have bills for the inspection services. So that's what happened yesterday.
Did the teachers all have working computers right now in the classrooms?
Yep. Computers are working. Like I said, Charles was very busy defunking our computers. But right now it looks like everything is working. But again, I'll give you an example. One of the motion detectors that was off all of a sudden started working around noontime today. So I don't know what to say. We had 3 of those control panels or units. One of them, you can put a sharp metal, in the middle of a giant fuse box, put a sharp metal object in a hole to reset it. That's always a good idea, but that's what they tell you to do. And one of the three of them came back on. By the way, these fuse boxes I'm talking about, are 5 feet tall and 2 feet wide. I mean, and they have, the wires are bigger than garden hoses. So I try to stay at a distance. So I'll keep you informed, but I want to thank Bobby Joe Blair for helping me with the filing.
Were there any issues with safety or security equipment, like the cameras outside or inside?
That's a great question. In the middle of all this, I kept going outside and coming back in using my car to see if the doors worked, and they did. It was, other than when the entire town went down. That's the other thing National Grid did. I don't know what the issue is, but in order to repair it, they shut down even the sections of Nahant that had power for about 30, 35 minutes. So whatever they did, it was good. It's unfortunately the insurance adjusters that I spoke with thinks that there were spikes and valleys of power, which is why we had some damage. And it's interesting, I remember 2 years ago, there was a power outage at my house on Cape Cod, and I had to get a new oven unit, a control unit for my electric oven. It's a gas oven, but it was the brains. It just fried. By the way, the electric company took no responsibility. So that was yesterday. I want to thank Kevin personally for his leadership. The staff, the students were phenomenal. The lights were going off and on, and then they were in the dark, and then they weren't. Luckily, it was a nice warm day. When the power was on, the heat was working, and the building stayed nice and warm. So hopefully it won't happen on a real cold day. But now we know. We throw the master switch, we go onto the generator and stay there until we get the okay. I did not authorize the power being turned back on until the electricians got word that all the power in the town was fully restored. And the fire department and the police department helped me with that communication. Because the last thing I wanted to do is turn it on too soon and have more damage.
So how long will it take before we know from Maya or
Well, we're covered.
National Grid? Yeah.
We are covered. It'll take me probably 2 weeks to get all the paperwork together and we still won't know until after we're done with all the repairs how much it costs.
Of course, that makes sense.
I mean, I'm going to be getting estimates, of course, but estimates are estimates. Okay. So that was our exciting. It was such a lovely day off I had yesterday. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, before we move on to the principal's report, why don't we go back and read and approve the minutes from the September 10th meeting. Is that right? That's one we didn't do. We were waiting for you, Tom, because you were at that meeting. So it looks like Ms. Ballantyne and Mr. Flynn were not at that meeting.
That's right.
Anyone have any questions about those minutes?
No.
Can I have a motion to approve them, please?
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 10th, 2019.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and I chair votes aye. Okay, moving on. Mr. Andrews for the principal's report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that. And I would like to echo what Mr. Parentozzi said, that it was an eventful day, but I think the students and staff did a great job. And I was just so pleased when the students were walking quietly down the hall as they do typically. You're going to get a few occasional, whoa, hey, but even in the dark, they were great. So that was wonderful. So I'd like to talk to you mostly today about teaching and learning at the Johnson School. We have some exciting events that have been taking place. One is that we've been getting the banners up across town. Nancy Cantalmo came to me before our artist Wes Sam Bruce visited and mentioned that they'd been discussing about spreading the message of proper civil discourse, and how could we help promote that through the town. And so we talked about it a bit, talked about using our Be Your Best Self motto, and with that, and also our marine science theme, created banners that you'll see now in Town Hall, at some of the churches in town, police station. They've been just welcomed everywhere, and the clergy, I'm understanding, are even recognizing that at their masses and services, and tying it into what they do. And so I think that's wonderful. I want to thank Nancy Cantalmo for helping to make this happen, for getting them out to everybody, and also for all the community support that we've had for it, and the positive feedback that we've really gotten for it. So, kudos to them for taking that step to put that message out there, and for the town hall and all the other departments for getting on board with it and accepting these messages from our students. So that was wonderful. Today we also had the Rock to Nahant activity take place. This is an annual science fair sponsored by SWIM, Safer Waters in Massachusetts. And Vi Paddock is the president, and she conducts this annual festival with myself and several volunteers. We have 11 stations, and volunteers who don't have kids at the school come in and give hours of their time to plan and execute a hands-on lesson. And so each class gets to visit about 3 to 5 stations. It's only about an hour to an hour and a half for each class, but in that they really enjoy it. They have 3 or 5 engaging activities. They're all about rocks, but they're also tied into their science standards. So it might be matter with rocks, or glacial erratics. The Nahant Historic Society provided, Julie Tarmy came and did a piece on the history of this boulder and how did it get to the shore on the Lynn side there as you come across the causeway, and where did it come from, and with maps and all these interactive pieces. So it was a really wonderful event, and I want to thank SWIM for having that happen today. And I also want to let you know that we've been experimenting with bringing robotics back to the after-school program, and Sylvan Learning is now offering it, but only at 3:30. And we were a little bit nervous about doing that because where do the students go for an hour and how does that work? But we've had good enrollment with the program. It's a strong program. It's easier than going to Sylvan Learning in Peabody for the program. And so it's an in-house program. It's offered by the PTO. If you're interested in finding out more about it, you can go onto the PTO's website when they have enrichment sign-ups and sign up your student for the robotics program. And then, as often happens in December, we have concerts. And so I want to let you know that we have 2 concerts coming up. The first on December 12th, and they'll be right here at Town Hall. That's this week, Thursday, for grades 3 to 6. Everyone in the community is welcome, and I would appreciate attendance. And that'll start at 6 p.m. And on December 19th, we'll have the holiday concert for grades K to 2. And that's at our school at 8:30 in the morning. Thank you, and unless there's questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to old business and other pending matters. Mr. Parentozzi, would you like to talk about the budget?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's 2 large items on this discussion this evening. One is the second draft of the budget. And so what I'd like to do is simply go down and highlight for you how this draft differs from the draft you saw at the last meeting. So why don't we start at the bottom? It's almost insignificantly different in terms of bottom line. It's still about a 3.5% increase because I had to add money in certain categories and subtract money in other categories so that the budget wouldn't swell. And I'll explain that in a moment. The new budget is approximately $600 less than the one you saw last time. The last budget was $4,119,865. This one is $4,119,278. By a percentage on a $4 million base, to me, that's insignificant. So how'd I get there? Well, if we go to the first page, purchase of supplies, I reduced the purchase of supplies from $16,000 to $12,000. That's in the middle, under school, about the fifth line up from the bottom. Right above sped supplies, hardware, software, purchase of supplies. The sped supplies, I lowered that from $8,000 to $6,000, drop of $2,000. The professional development, I dropped from $12,000 to $10,000, reducing that by $2,000. So in that subsection, it went from $911,000 to $903,000. On page 2, we have the opposite happening. If you look at the line that says school psych sped, go down 2 lines, salary speech, the line item is now $67,128 because that last year when I built the budget was a 0.7 speech and language for the current employee who in August resigned and we had all the difficulty hiring someone. Today, I'm pleased to announce Beth Sutherland started full-time because that was the only way. If you remember, I went through 4 part-time speech and language people, and we absolutely have to have a speech and language therapist on staff because if you remember, I gave up and I hired an agency, and a week before they started, the agency canceled on me. So this is by far the best way to do it, but that increased that line item by $11,913 from $55,215, which is the $53,864 rolled for the raise, to this number. On page 3, there were no changes. On page 4, I reduced the purchase of services for school grounds by $1,000. Went from $2,000 to $1,000. I reduced the supplies under school and building maintenance from $15,500. I reduced it $3,500 to $12,000. And that's basically it. So again, to offset the increase, I reduced line items. So this budget is basically not where I want it to be. The item that I have not been able to do at this point because of other responsibilities and because things were moving around is bring to you an accurate number for next year on the regular full-time employee salary line. That's a $620,000 line. My hope is that I can fine-tune that number. That's on page 1, under school. It's the second line under school. It's the first one that's not a 0. So that's the one I'm working on for the next rendition. Unfortunately, in terms of our finances, the special education director has informed me that there could be as many as 3 significant changes in students with high needs within the next 2 to 3 months. So an example would be a student is currently receiving services that cost X, and the professional educators believe that those services are not being successful. In other words, the student is not demonstrating a meaningful improvement in their learning. So we may have to provide more intensive educational services. If that's the case, and that could be the case for 1, 2, or 3 students right now. If that's the case for all 3 of them, the budget under tuition for special education and transportation for special education is going to grow dramatically. If you ask me today what I was talking about, I would say in the $200,000 to $350,000 range. That's the potential. Now, that may not happen. The IEP meetings may determine to keep the students where they are now. The IEP meetings may determine that a much less costly solution would be adding hours of therapy or adding hours of with the adjustment counselor. I don't know. So we'll see. But I did want you to know that that is, in fact, the case. I will be telling the town accountant and the town administrator about those potentials. I already gave them a heads up, but I'll be going into greater detail with them after you know about it. As of Thursday, I will be putting a spending freeze on the budget in terms of anything that's not a requirement for education or a contract or a salary. So any discretionary spending is going to be put on hold because we're talking about 2 changes. One would be on the current budget, the fiscal 20 budget, and another would be on the fiscal 21 budget. So we have 2 potentials. Every year I've been before you saying things are going well, and every year I gave you a little reminder that they don't always go the way they have been going. And this is a year that may be the case. Again, I want to highlight maybe, because the IEP meetings have not taken place. This is an early heads up for everybody because it's so unusual for us under my tenure, where things have been going the opposite direction. We've been bringing students back to Swampscott and back to our school. So I will keep you informed as much as I can, protecting the identity of the students at all times, of course. And let it be known that this is not a question of choice. These are not controllable costs.
If there is a change for those students with their IEP meetings, would we'd be able to apply for possibly some circuit breaker relief, correct? If there was a change?
There's 2 possibilities, both of which don't help the fiscal 20 budget. One is that when you have that kind of a change, in a large district we'd be talking millions of dollars, but here even a $250,000 to $300,000 change is dramatic. I will apply for special consideration for special reimbursement from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's one. Two, yes, the circuit breaker reimbursement would go up, but that won't have any impact on the fiscal 20 budget. That would help us with the 21 budget. Now, we also have the advantage of this year, the new funding formula also reimburses for transportation, which it never did before. But that won't start until the law actually takes effect. So I don't know what that means. Does that mean they put that into effect for the fiscal year 21 or halfway through fiscal year 20? I don't know. So we have two possibilities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the second item, I believe, Madam Chair, would you like to address the meeting with the town official update?
Sure. So I've reached out to FinCom and the town administrator, and the plan is that Mr. Parentozzi and I will try to have a sit-down with them prior to a larger meeting, and hopefully we'll make that happen in January. So I'll be working on that, and I'll let you know scheduling.
And once again, I'd like you to know if you'd like me to take over any of that communication, I'd be pleased to do it, but whatever you decide.
No, we can talk about that. I think it's a matter of scheduling. We need to do it when you're going to be here, and so I can be flexible to a point.
As can I, as my presence in the district all day yesterday proved.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to overdo that. Okay. Mr. Parentozzi, do you want to talk about the parent and family engagement policy for
I
our
would love to.
second reading?
So this, again, is one of those audit items. We became aware several months ago that our parent communication policy did not meet the requirements of federal law. ESSA is the federal funding of schools act. And therefore, once again, I applied to the MASC, and I asked them for their family engagement policy, and they didn't have one. But we were able to find one that met the ESSA requirements, and they're working on theirs now. But so we really need this because we get federal funds. Now, we don't get a ton of federal funds, but obviously in the condition we are in right now financially, every dollar counts. So, Madam Chair, I recommend that without alteration, because this is a policy that meets the obligation and all the guidelines of the Federal Funding Formula Act, the school committee approve the policy KBA-1.
Make a motion to approve the policy KBA-1 as read.
May I just ask, was this one, I thought we were going to have a third reading on this.
Madam Chair, that's completely up to the school committee.
Okay,
What's required is 2 readings.
Okay.
Some districts have 2 readings plus the approval. That is not required.
Okay. I know we spoke about it last time, and I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm confused. Okay.
I'll second the motion.
I would suggest, Madam Chair, just to talk about that just a brief moment longer. On any policy that would change something significant for a parent or a student, I would probably recommend that you have 3. This is pro forma.
Right. This is to have on the books. So we have a motion,
We have a motion and a
and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Okay, so we now have that policy. And moving on to new business. First item is fiscal year 2020 guidelines for community use of Johnson School facilities.
Madam Chair, if you remember, we had a facilities question put before us by community members last meeting.
Correct.
So what I did was, trying to be proactive, is I went back and I looked at our facilities use guidelines, and I compared them to districts around us, and I found our guidelines to be wanting on several issues. What I am not recommending is to increase our charges whatsoever. So what I did is, working with Ms. April, and I want to thank her for all her good work, I rewrote the facilities documents. To make this easier for you, I hand put a note, you could call it a mark or an asterisk if you want, on anything I changed. So I'd be happy to go through them with you. Number one, obviously the dates changed. The asterisk means new language or change. That's up at the top. The first change would be, no, I numbered them. You also have the old ones in your packet if you want to compare them. I felt that we had so many now, numbering them was probably a good idea. So number three, we always had groups were restricted, but there was something that came up in a different district where somebody actually did this. They reserved the space, paid for it, and then subletted it for a profit. Which we didn't prohibit. So it made sense to me to say you can't sublet or split rentals.
Genius.
I would have, yeah.
And splitting rentals means like two
Splitting
grades.
rentals would mean that I pay the $50 an hour for the gym, and then I let somebody else come in with me and charge them to split it with me. Or don't even charge them. So if I'm a Boy Scout troop and I rent a cafeteria, I don't invite the Girl Scout troop to join us without us knowing about it.
Got it.
Okay?
Sense?
Number 6 is new. That this was kind of a given, but the applicant assumes full responsibility for control and supervision of all participants and visitors in conjunction with the event. Makes sense? Number 7 is new. No activity or sports or wheeled equipment may be used inside or the immediate vicinity of the building. Evidently, other districts have had difficulty with skateboards or, two-wheeled scooters. We never have, but it was worthwhile putting it in to avoid it. Number 9 is interesting. We prohibited alcoholic beverages, which are illegal, but we never used the word drugs. So that's why the asterisk is there. I just added the word drugs. Number 10, the use of school equipment is not included, but may be requested for an additional charge. We never addressed that in our application before. And we don't have a history, nor do we have a technology department, so we don't do it a lot, but if somebody needed something, I want them to know that we could charge them for it, depending upon what it is. So for example, if someone rented the cafetorium for a glee club performance, and our custodian had to put up the risers, we would charge them, as a concrete example.
Makes sense.
Okay? The AED information was on the previous document, but I bolded it because I thought that was important, that people understand that we have the automatic defibrillators, but because they're not a school event, we don't provide a trained person. And I thought that was important to bold it. I didn't want them to think that we would. And the next one, and the last one on this page, I added the rate sheet. In the past, it said, I have read the above and agree to the guidelines for community use. I want them to not only read this page and agree, but I want them to read the third page, which is the other guidelines.
Real quick, I think we skipped number 13, if there's anything you wanted to cover there. It has a little star next to number 13.
Which one?
13?
Oh, 13, I skipped it. I apologize.
Okay.
13's the newest one. We just did that yesterday. Just so you know how this all occurred, I also want to thank our two custodians who met with me. I felt it was important to get them involved because they have to administrate this, particularly James Federico. I mean, he's here every night, and he's the one who's dealing with this. So James and I met last Thursday, and we went over it, and he made several of very sensible suggestions. Number 13 is one of them. He said that in bad weather, kids sometimes show up 45 minutes early, and he feels bad leaving them outside, but they're unsupervised, and it concerns him. So number 13 says building availability is limited to 15 minutes before and after approved time. Extra time will incur an extra charge at the discretion of school staff. So this is what that means. The boys basketball crew have a triple overtime game, and they go past their allotted time. I'm leaving it up to the person there, James, to decide whether we should charge them extra. If there's no harm, no foul, to use a basketball metaphor. But if he has to stay extra and we have to pay him for that, they should know that, but they have to know it in advance. They shouldn't be surprised. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
My pleasure.
Okay. The next one is the actual form, and I added a couple of things, obviously changed the date. Also said that technology and equipment use will result in additional charges on a sliding scale of $20 to $75 an hour. Once again, due process. I think people should know that if they ask for something, I mean, somebody might have in their head that it's going to be $5. I want them to know that it won't. And then James particularly and I talked a long time about how the building should be left. And this is language that I copied from a couple of different places and bolded it. It is expected that all groups clean the areas so that the areas are substantially in the same condition as when the group arrived. All damage, costs, and additional cleanup fees will be charged to the user. Damage may result in approval for use of facilities being revoked. Again, it makes sense. We probably would have tried to do it anyway, but people should be put on notice that that's happening. And the last change, the last two changes, I added my signature to this. And frankly, what I want is to relieve Mr. Andrews of the responsibility of administrating the building use. I want to take it on myself. But I left his signature because it could be a quickie that I'm not here, and he may have to do it. But in all candor, I want to be able to monitor this and not have the principal deal with it. I think I should serve more as the facilities director than the principal. And then the last thing is, the asterisk is we added housing status to the disclaimer of our discrimination that we don't do. And the third page is I just cleaned up some things. I moved some, I put Nahant Education Foundation in the civic community. I changed the date, obviously. I added a couple of clarifications. Under conditions, the first paragraph, town-based nonprofit 51 OC3 organizations must submit evidence of status to qualify for nonprofit Nahant youth rate. I mean, anybody can claim they're nonprofit. I wanted some proof. And that civic and community groups will be charged $50 per hour for a custodian when the custodian is not scheduled to work. So I didn't want somebody to go up at the top and say, oh, we're nonprofit. You're telling me it's $20 an hour, and now you're telling me it's $50 an hour. It's $20 an hour when the custodian's on site, on a Tuesday night when we have school. On a Saturday, it's not. Because we have to pay overtime. $20 an hour doesn't even cover it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay? I wanted them to know that the facilities are available only with superintendent's approval. That was one of the conversations we had that lasted the longest. The state requires our facilities to be used by people who are trained in the facilities use. Because what they don't want to happen is they don't want somebody to come in, use a public school kitchen, give everybody a disease, and then have the school district liable, which makes sense. So I was going to be very detailed about what I just said. I couldn't put it in less than 4 or 5 sentences, so we decided they got to go through me. And if they're not food serve certified, they don't use our kitchen. Example, the PTO can use it when Roxanne, who's certified, is there, but can't when she's not. How do you say that? You know, it got really complicated. So
Names change over time, yeah, that makes sense.
exactly. So just kept it simple. And then we never had any language about using our fields or space. Frankly, we've never had anybody ask, but it would be in the realm of possibility that somebody wanted to have a birthday party, use the cafeteria and the field and the playground. So we want to be able to determine what that cost is. And then I added today's date for your review. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This is a nitpicky thing. You have little asterisks next to the $20 an hour up at the top,
That's correct.
and then there's no asterisk at the bottom, so, is that referring to the little asterisk included in the first bullet? I'm trying to link,
Or is it all the conditions?
or is it, right, and I think, civic community, if they want to do something on Sunday morning, a civic community group would have to pay the $50, correct?
Yes.
Yep, so perhaps moving either having the fee-related things together at the top, which I guess they are, and having those be asterisks instead of round bullets, or something to link the two,
Yeah.
that's all.
You're absolutely right. I left those 3 asterisks after the hour because they were on the original and they were on when I got here, and I didn't know what they meant, and I couldn't figure it out.
So there is one typed asterisk in the third bullet for the custodial fees,
Oh, maybe that's,
but it's not,
Yeah.
it's hard to notice that that's what you're referring to with that asterisk.
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like a formatting thing, I would just,
Yeah, let me put a question mark and,
I would put an asterisk just at the top of civic community after that, nonprofit, because the asterisk applies that we'll be charged an additional $50 an hour when a custodian is not scheduled to work. Is that what it is?
yes.
So if it's no charge, it's a $50 charge if
That's
it's a
correct.
Sunday morning. It's a $70 charge if it's a nonprofit.
correct.
So,
Yep. Might I make a suggestion to move that particular one up to the actual
Yeah.
charges section? Because that might be more clear.
Right, because you have this, information about when and things
The
like
bullet itself or the asterisk?
All of it, the actual custodial reference to $50 per hour, that whole bullet.
And I think the asterisk should be on the one above where it is. So if I'm a nonprofit Nahant Youth at $20 an hour, asterisk, the asterisk should say civic community groups will be charged $50 per hour for a custodian when the custodian is not. That's really where the asterisk belongs, doesn't it?
I think it's both.
I thought, I thought it was for all. If it's a
It
50,
should apply to the for-profit other as well, then it would be an
All
additional
groups are gonna be charged.
50 on top of the 50 for
Then-
that group as well.
You don't have to put civic community, you can just put all groups will be charged $50 per hour when a custodian is
an additional.
In
$50.
additional,
additional.
An additional, right, that's
If
changing.
all groups are gonna be charged $50 if a custodian's not scheduled working that time,
Oh, yeah.
then just
Yeah.
put, all groups will be charged an additional $50 per hour.
Under all rental charges, that second line, bring up this civic community group bullet and just change it to all groups will be charged an additional $50. And that,
Yeah, that makes sense.
And move it up.
and move it up.
Because it doesn't matter what group it is, it's all, any group's
Yeah.
gonna be charged.
it applies to,
So put that right underneath the columns. Right?
Right, or underneath the all rental charges, up in that section.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Because that'll be under all of the columns. Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense.
This is good.
Thank you.
And just because I can't help myself, the last, the last sentence in the first bullet, if evidence of 50% resident participation is not presented, the for-profit rate will apply. And I would just take out the $50 because
Right.
you're talking about, it's $50 and it may be 100 if there's no custodian, so I would
Okay.
just simplify it.
Yep. Good,
Yep.
perfect.
One more, Mrs. Parentozzi, is just 501c3, I think is what the typo is there. Is that a 510c3?
Oh, you're right, yeah,
Yeah,
That last sentence in the under conditions?
right.
it's 501(3)(c).
501?
Yeah, and there's a dash too, I think.
Yeah.
501 dash C3, isn't it? I think that's what it looks like.
Let me pull
Yeah,
up
C3.
our friend
It's
Google if
C3.
you like.
Google. Thank you very much for your help. I hope this will help
I'm dyslexic. So
clarify for some members of the community who had some questions for you last time.
This looks good.
501c3, 501 parentheses C,
C3.
Parentheses?
3, yep. Yes, or you know what, you don't have to do the parentheses, I guess,
Small C3.
yes.
Or you can do your own thing.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay,
Let's move on.
moving on.
The next three policies, members of the school committee, I'm going to ask you, unless you find a typo, that the concepts in these are legally required, and we're doing the first reading. I just got these. These were just written by the MASC staff attorney in October of this year. That's how new they are. That's why the ones we just passed are outdated. So there are three. One is file JFABD, Homeless Students Enrollment Rights and Services. And so I recommend that the school committee accept JFABD for first reading.
I'll make a motion to accept policy JFABD for first reading.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. The next one is policy JFABE, Educational Opportunities for Military Children. Once again, this is a policy that was just rewritten by the MASC attorney, and I recommend that the school committee accept policy JFABE for its first reading.
I'll make a motion to accept for first reading policy JFABE, Educational Opportunities for Military Children.
Second that?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The next policy, Educational Opportunities for Children in Foster Care, policy JFABF. And once again, this is required by the sustainability audit, and I recommend that the school committee accept this policy, the first reading of this policy, excuse me.
I'll make a motion to accept for a first reading policy JFABF, Educational Opportunities for Children in Foster Care.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Great. So we will look at these again next week after we've had time to read them, or next meeting, I should say.
I will have those on the agenda in January. The other thing Chris and I are working on is an index. You know, we keep adding policies, taking policies, and the index needs a lot of work. I had hoped to get to it this summer, never did, but we're working on it.
I can
The
imagine.
online policy manual now has all of the updated policies except these 4. So we're in good shape there.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to personnel matters. Mr. Parentazzi.
Thank you. It is my great pleasure to tell you that Beth Schundler has started. She started today. Mrs. Schundler has a master's in communication sciences and disorders. She is nationally licensed and is in the process of attaining the DESE license. Speech and language therapists need 2 licenses. And it oftentimes is problematic for people when they move state to state. The national license is actually the most important one. It's accepted by every state in the country, obviously. And so we're really pleased. She's experienced, and we are thrilled to have her on staff. What she will be doing is she will be doing all of our speech and language pathology evaluation, which will save us having an outside consultant at $17 an hour. And she will be providing the speech and language services. She also has a Bachelor of Arts in Special Education. So she will also be assisting our full-time special education teacher in providing special education services to children. And those services are provided both push-in and pull-out. And that's obvious. That is all determined by the IEP, the Individual Educational Plan, whether it's in or out. It's not just haphazardly decided. It's all a well-documented and exact plan. So she started this very day, and we are all very thrilled.
Wonderful.
Great. Good to hear.
Good, great to hear. Oh, I think I failed to mention something. She's a neighbor of all of you. She lives in Nahant.
Oh, great.
Just moved, as a matter of fact, right behind the library.
Oh, right around the corner.
So,
Excellent.
Very
yeah,
nice.
excellent.
That's great. Next on the agenda is business from the committee.
I'm supposed to be working on the secondary families and guardian survey. Started and stopped,
Okay,
but
yep.
I'm working on it.
Mr. Andrews, did you have something?
Madam Chair, I do. Madam Chair, I do. That reminded me that I did have an opportunity to share the parent and guardian survey with our school council tonight. And so we'll be reviewing that and using that in our school improvement plan, in that we will present a draft to our own group in February. So they have copies of it from the one that Mr. Parentozzi put together for us with redaction, and we're going forward.
Great. In terms of the school improvement plan, do we review progress made on that in the spring or in the fall?
The, Madam Chair, through you.
Am I-
Great question. The school council reviews it, and then you review their review.
Okay,
There must be a better way of saying that.
yeah, no.
Yeah, we write it, perhaps?
Huh?
We write the school improvement plan,
Yeah.
and then you accept it.
I'm just thinking, it seems like it's been a while, and I'm
Yep.
trying to think of the timing. It's the spring?
That's right.
Okay.
Typically, April.
Yep.
Okay.
There are also going to be a review of the survey, the school improvement plan with the district plan, the comprehensive plan, which we're entering year 3 of 5.
And the strategic
Yeah,
plan?
we did that my first year.
The strategic plan, that's what I'm thinking of. I believe, yes. I
I
apologize.
think we are 3 years in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm always positive it's 17 to 22. I am positive. I looked at it today.
Okay. All right, well,
Busy evening.
yes, and the clock up there is wrong, so we should, can I have a motion?
To adjourn the December 10th school committee meeting at 8:38 p.m.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and we adjourn